we have seen the leader of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party delivering his verdict or his aspects to the agency Reuters in the upcoming election, and he said that there is no scope for a coalition government with Bangladesh Jamaat-e-Islami, which is very important to understand the next few days of political stature in Bangladesh. And all of this was readily available through social media. Even last night we have seen popular multimedia companies, journalists been picked up by members of the forces, and of course they were released later, but of course the freedoms that we have all enjoyed the last couple of months is coming to an end. According to the CA Shafiqul Alam's response, this has been the time, the most important moment in Bangladesh history where we all had the freedom of judging all the political parties and judging all the events that happen in Bangladesh. So I want to understand with John Dalton in the studio, social media has huge implications in the decision making of a nation. We also come to find out that those who are inmates in jail will also have an opportunity to cast their vote through postal ballot. What is your observation? I want to know how you are feeling about Bangladesh, about the observers' situation in Bangladesh, and how many of those who will be contesting in Bangladesh's seats. What is your observation?
Well, I think Bangladesh has always been worried about misinformation and disinformation. It was used. It's used by every regime in some way or not in the world. I mean, somebody controls the press. You go to China, they control the press. In the United States, we brag about having the First Amendment rights, but many people are prevented from doing so. I think here there's a tendency as the elections come closer and closer for a lot of intentional disinformation to be released. I mean, the stakes are very high. 5 years future of the next government. So people think that winning at any cost is essential. I saw the comment about the not wanting to have a coalition government with between two certain parties, but I think there's going to have to be some accommodation. I think that all these parties have shown a power and a prestige and have attracted some public interest. I think it'd be in the best interest of everybody to have, if not a coalition government, at least a collegial, non-competition, non-conflicting government in the future. I don't think the country can survive that very easily. I think that the rural population are going to have, the profile is going to be one voting on one way, and I think the urban population will vote somewhat differently. And I think that tension is going to continue to play out in terms of investment, location of resources, participation in government. That rural-urban split, which is severe now, is going to become exacerbated, in my opinion. We'll see. Now, as to the people in prison who are given the right to vote and the people who are outside the country that are given the right to vote by postal ballot, I mean, this is a unintended consequences issue. Clearly, the civil liberties of people are being protected. They're given the right to vote. But there are so many potential ramifications from this that may not have been properly thought through, both in terms of the 1 million or so people who are living outside the country who have been given the right to submit a postal ballot, as well as the people in prison, many of whom are political prisoners and have a political bias and may vote a certain way.
Yes.
So I think that there was not, I mean, I think this was characteristic actually of a lot of things, but there was not really thought through what are the ramifications, what are the implications, how could this go bad before policy was announced and adopted and put into place.
Of course, that is very important updates that you've given us, as well as there is another news. The Bangladesh Election Commission has suspended the observation, accreditation and distribution over 10,000 observer cards to a local NGO named People's Association for Social Advancement as of February 7th, and it said by the action that was taken, the suspension was announced by the Chief Advisor's Press Secretary Shafiqul Alam and Deputy Press Secretary Abul Kalam Azad Majumdar following a meeting on the election preparation. Almost of the 50,000 or so election observation status, 10,000 observer cards were given to this organization, a local NGO. It has been suspended just a week, just yesterday it was suspended, so just merely a few days before the election. We have only 4 days left before everyone can continue on contesting. What is your observation? Do you think that violence may ensue, especially given after how we've seen the events on Friday after the prayers?
I don't know about the violence, but I think it's a very logical decision by the government to suspend these cards for people who are partisan observers. In other words, people who may have a vested interest in the results of the election and can influence people while they're going to vote. So that decision, it seems logical in some respects. When you're an election observer, as I have been in Egypt, election observers have to be totally neutral, unbiased. They're only looking at whether the procedures are being properly followed as outlined in the law. They have no right to participate or advise anybody or talk to anyone in line about who they're going to vote for or how they're going to vote or why it's important to vote this way or that way, whether for the referendum or for the election. So keeping international observers in place is probably a safe, sound policy. It should not be seen necessarily as, it's sort of like making sure that people who have a vested interest are not engaged in influencing how the vote is going to come out. And I think that would be a logical decision by any government to say, okay, let's restrict, if 10,000 is a lot of observers of a local NGO.
1/5 of the entirety bank.
Yeah, well, that's a lot too many people who may be compromised in some way. You're only looking at, is a little ballot box open? Are people protected so that their vote is not observed? Are people not going into the voting booth to tell them how to vote? Now, you have a problem in Bangladesh, quite honestly, and in other countries too, where there's a highly illiterate population that cannot read the ballot. And they need to be instructed like, okay, that's why you have the sheaf of wheat and the boat and all of this kind of stuff in the past, is that people could essentially vote for the symbol because they couldn't read well enough to know what it was all about, which is a real challenge when it comes to looking at that referendum, and the vote on the referendum. But I think it was a logical decision by government, it seems to me, to try to restrict anybody influencing the election. And I hope that there is no violence, although it's already starting to show up both internally and in terms of between the contestants. And the army is supposedly mobilizing 100,000 troops to try to maintain, along with the police, some presence on election day.
Right.
That would give people the confidence to go and vote. And so we want people to vote, but they should be voting without restriction and without fear.
Of course.